along with an article describing the crippling anxiety among officials inside the White House. It says in part, quote, "Some aides now refuse to communicate by email. Many have taken to using encrypted apps to get around the investigations Trump has ordered to clamp down on leaks. Others are skittish about even picking up the phone, assuming someone is always listening or monitoring calls." Joining me now, CNN politics producer Dan Merica, New York Times contributor Wajahat Ali, historian, professor, and author Julian Zelizer, and CNN political commentator Alice Stewart. So the president denies any chaos in his administration. He says that it is running like a fine-tuned machine. Julian, here's what he said just moments ago.
The White House is running so smoothly, so smoothly. And believe me, I and we inherited one big mess. That I can tell you. But I know that you want safe neighborhoods where the streets belong to families and communities, not gang members and drug dealers who are right now, as I speak, being thrown out of the country, and they will not be let back in. We will have strong borders again.
So you heard the president there, Julian, saying that, look, things are going very smoothly. It's running like a fine-tuned machine. But however, you have his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, fired, essentially. The travel ban rollout being blocked by the judiciary. You know, these reports, like from Time Magazine, saying there is chaos in the White House. Just for perspective, how does this stack up against the first few weeks of past administrations?
Well, I think the White House is struggling. If you take all the ordinary measures, national approval ratings, he is doing worse than most presidents are at this time. Having your national security advisor resign as part of a scandal that is even shaking Republicans on Capitol Hill is not something that you have in the so-called first 100 days. And in terms of legislation, it's been very slow going. And there really isn't a big legislative initiative to speak of. So whether you are a supporter of President Trump or an opponent, I think it's fair to say that this has been a rough few weeks. And there are stories of division and discord inside the White House as all this unfolds.
And as you're speaking there, Air Force One landing back in Palm Beach following the rally there in Melbourne, Florida. Wajahat, the Time article I was referring to says, quote, "Little takes place in the White House these days without a complication or contradiction," and points to the dismal dismissal of National Security Advisor Michael Flynn as senior aides were getting ready to announce his resignation. As we know, Kellyanne went on TV saying that the president had full confidence in Flynn. Where is the disconnect in your view?
Well, if this is a finely tuned machine, I think that's an alternative fact, and I think it resembles more like a rusted, broken down machine from Mad Max Fury Road. That's the presidency right now. The dysfunction starts from the top. And listen, there's two major reasons why Donald Trump did today's rally and did the press conference yesterday. Two reasons. Number one, as mentioned, the dysfunction, it's leaking left and right. More leaks from this White House than anyone in this town of D.C. has seen. These are Republican insiders within the White House talking about the dysfunction, number one. Number two, Russia, which is not fake news, and the fact that Russia, now our intelligence agencies are saying that Russia hacked this election illegally, was in contact with Donald Trump's staffers before the election. Who, what, why? These questions need to be asked. And the fact that Michael Flynn talked to the Russian ambassador about the sanctions. Trump knew about it, kept quiet about it. Washington Post finally talked about it last week, which forced the resignation. Now there's no national security advisor, and every single type of major legislation that he promised is failing. The Muslim ban failed. 3-0 unanimous beatdown by the Ninth Circuit Court. He wanted to make Mexico build the wall. Mexico said no, and that broke down. You know, we're having 7 Muslim majority countries that he put on the ban, and now some of them are allies, like Yemen and Iraq. They're turning their backs. So this is dysfunction from top down, bottom up, domestically, foreign policy, internally. Kellyanne Conway has no idea what Sean Spicer is saying, who has no idea what Donald Trump's saying, who has no idea what Stephen Bannon's saying. And so this is not the model of a finely tuned machine. And finally, he cannot gaslight America, the CIA, and the press, which is not the enemy of the American people, but our job is to step up, report facts, and speak truth to power, which is what we're doing and is what we're going to do, especially here on CNN.
Alice, your response.
There's a lot, as usual, with Waj, a lot to unpack there. But let me start with this. President Trump says that the administration is running like a fine-tuned machine. The Times says that it is White House in chaos. In my view, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Every administration, when they get going, there's going to be bumps in the roads, there's going to be staff infighting, there's going to be people jockeying for position, fighting for access to the president. That is normal, that is not out of the ordinary. Yes, there could be a greater degree of that in this case, but that being said, they are still operating at the pleasure of the president. He is fine with, satisfied with the work they are doing, and they are getting a lot of things done. Now, with regard to the narrative, yes, they've had a bumpy week with all the many, many negative things that Waj just noted. I won't repeat them. But the mission for the news conference we had the other day, the campaign-style event in South Carolina yesterday, and this event today, was to change the narrative. And what he did is he put the focus on the media being fake news, talking about incorrect information and the repeated lies, and that became the driving force of the news for the past few days. I personally think the media has an important job as the fourth estate to be an important check and balance on our government officials. They have an important role and they take it very seriously. President Trump believes that carte blanche fake news and inaccurate information, that's how he sees it. But from his standpoint, the last few days has been to put the focus on the fake media and news media and attack the media, and also to drive his message home with the base, shift the narrative to that, and as well as connecting with people like Gene. And for that, mission accomplished. He's done exactly what he wanted to do. The narrative has changed now to, again, talking about the media, but also he needed this shot in the arm. He needed to connect with the people. He needed to see people like Gene out there standing behind him in order to really hit the ground running on this next week. And I think what it did, there's clearly going to be these Russian stories continue to pop up, but this is what he needed to do to get back to a good frame of mind to continue to do the work that he's promised the American people that he will do.
And there's no doubt he really thrives off these crowds, off the energy of these crowds. And it is true, Julian, that the White House can be sort of a lonely, insular place. So it's no surprise that he would want to go out and reconnect with those that put him in office. You wrote an op-ed for CNN.com, though, saying that the president's performance at Thursday's news conference is fueling fears that his presidency is going off the rails. And now you see this campaign event, as the White House is calling it today. What are your main concerns, Julian?
Well, look, from the press conference, there were a number of things he did that bothered people. One was continuing to say things about the Electoral College victory, for example, that aren't true. Part of it was the anger and animosity he has towards specific opponents, specific networks, specific newspapers that show a kind of disposition that reminds me a little bit of Richard Nixon. And part of it was simply a refusal to engage in information we now have about Russia in the election. You know, he dismisses it rather than arguing that he's going to provide a solution. So all of that, and simply the kind of erratic way in which he speaks can be dangerous for a president, because when you say something as president, it has big ramifications here in the States and abroad. So it's different than when you're campaigning. And so I think all of that was, as you watched it, a little bit disturbing and for many people frightening.
Julian, Alice Wajahat, thank you so much. We do appreciate it.